Communist Armada rolls into place. Spring 1975. It is 30 years since the first shots were fired in the Vietnam War. Now, 2 years after America's withdrawal, a final offensive is about to begin. It will take just 55 more days to end a 10,000-day war. January 1973, the Paris Peace Treaty is signed. Under the treaty, only 50 U.S. military advisors remain from a one-time force of 500,000. The main compromise allows Hanoi to keep 150,000 regular troops in the South and allows President Thieu to remain in power. Although Congress forbids further U.S. military action, President Nixon gives Thieu secret assurances that America will use full force if necessary. But in August 1974, Nixon resigns. In December 1974, the communist leaders meet in Hanoi. They decide upon a 2-year program for military victory. Their immediate plan is to force Thieu from office. North Vietnam's chief strategist is Defense Minister Bo Nguyen Giap.
Even in Saigon, people are opposing Thieu and trying to overthrow him. You can't survive if you go against the people's will. The American imperialists thought even when they withdrew their troops from Vietnam, they would still continue to transform part of Vietnam into a new colony of theirs. Even now, if they deploy their air force and navy, they will fail again. The Vietnamese people do not fear such things. It is obvious that our people, in particular our countrymen and soldiers fighting in the South, have beaten the American imperialists.
Thieu is still totally dependent on American aid to maintain his army. But Congress wants to end U.S. support. As American aid declines, so does South Vietnamese morale.
Since 1973, from the time we signed the peace agreement until 1975, our war potential has been reduced to 60% because of the cut of the economic and the military aid from the United States. And that, I say that the Vietnamization has not been honestly done as promised by the United States. This is the main reason of the collapse of South Vietnam.
In Saigon, there is still hope America will return. The capital is crowded with refugees. Almost half the country's budget is spent on defense, yet war equipment is not being replaced. Hanoi now takes extraordinary efforts to ensure a surprise offensive. The field commander, General Van Tien Dung, is sent into South Vietnam. But to remain anonymous, he travels part of the way by bicycle. Journalist Wilfred Burchett.
They went to great, considerable lengths to guards keep secrecy. They kept secret the fact that Van Tien Dung had even gone to the south. They kept issuing birthday messages or congratulatory messages from Hanoi, signed in his name, and his car went to the staff headquarters at the same time every morning. So at all levels, they were very conscious of the need for secrecy, and I think very effectively kept the secret.
Hanoi moves 3 armored infantry divisions around Ban Mi Tut in the Western Highlands. Though Ban Mi Tut is a strategic center, only 4,000 South Vietnamese troops are deployed there. 2 a.m., March 10th, 1975. An artillery barrage opens the attack. Tanks spearhead the 25,000-man communist force. They encircle the city. By dawn, after 4 hours of intense artillery fire, North Vietnamese infantry penetrates the defenses. President Thieu has no time to reinforce. On the first day of battle, most of the city is captured. By next morning, fighting ends. Half of the South Vietnamese soldiers surrender or desert. The first big battle of the final offensive is over. Now, in one of the most controversial moves of the war, President Thieu abandons 2 northern provinces. He also decides to evacuate the entire highlands region and redeploy his troops further south.
We have not to wait before it becomes too late, and we cannot do anything. We have to take the risk, a calculated risk, because the redeployment, the withdrawal without the mobility, without the great firepower support is a risk, but it's a must for us.
The withdrawal from the highlands becomes a trail of blood and confusion. From the towns of Pleiku and Kon Tum, 500,000 soldiers and civilians flee toward the coast. Military authorities choose an almost unusable highway, believing it's safe from communist attack. They are wrong. The North Vietnamese fire on the retreat. It becomes known as the Convoy of Tears. Only 120,000, 1 in 4, reach the coast, where the panic renews. Survivors tell of babies and old people crushed by military vehicles, and of children dying on the road from hunger. The withdrawal was rated one of the worst planned and worst executed in military history. It has a domino effect. Province capitals begin falling at the rate of 1 a day. President Thieu now asks for urgent U.S. military action. Washington's response is relayed by Ambassador Bui Diem.
By the time I rushed back home, half the country was lost already. And I did say frankly to all my friends that there is no more hopes from the U.S. side. It means that if the things comes to worst, the American wouldn't come back again. So we have to think in terms of realities.
In Saigon, strict censorship keeps hope in the headlines. Few Saigonese know the full military disaster. Publicly, Thieu says his troops are holding. Hanoi, March 18th. North Vietnam's leaders savor their biggest victory since defeating the French 21 years earlier. They decide on a daring new strategy to cut South Vietnam in half. The main prize will be the ancient city of Hue, Vietnam's old capital and spiritual center. Within 24 hours, preparations for the attack begin. Hue's northern defenses are hit first. Then heavy 130mm guns hammer the southern and western approaches. Now Hue is cut off from Da Nang to the south. On March 25th, after a 3-day siege, Hue falls without resistance. The communist flag had flown here for 28 days during the Tet Offensive in 1968. This time, it will stay. The North Vietnamese advance continues almost unopposed as South Vietnamese forces break and run. At the first communist advance on Hue, the area commander orders retreat. Officers, then their men, abandon the city and its civilians. Their only escape route is the sea, south to Da Nang. In the panic, many troops drown trying to reach the boats. At Da Nang, there is a widespread belief that a deal has been made to abandon the city to the communists. 3 million people try to flee south. As 35,000 North Vietnamese troops approach Da Nang, the South Vietnamese commander abandons his men. Other officers remove their uniforms and hide. The opening artillery barrage is enough to end resistance. 100,000 South Vietnamese soldiers surrender after being left leaderless. Da Nang falls in only 32 hours. Former Premier Nguyen Cao Ky.
Now, for that final debacle, I have to admit that it's our responsibilities. Or to be exact, I should say it's Mr. Thieu's responsibilities. Ban Me Thuot, when it first started, commanding officers ran first. In the ICO area, Da Nang, commanding officers ran. Everywhere, commanding officers ran first. And all those commanding officers were appointed by Mr. Thieu.
Actually, the first time, the morale of the army was affected. Not affected because they have been just overrun. Affected since 2 years, because everyone understands that the military aid has been cut, the economic aid has been cut. There's many signs that America have abandoned us.
By early April, the communists control the north and center. There's new respect for the North Vietnamese field commander, General Zung. He is an outstanding tactician like his tutor, General Giap. Of this period, he wrote, "We understood that time is strength and that an opportune moment is priceless." The U.S. Army Chief of Staff, General Wyand, now visits Vietnam. He reports that Saigon urgently needs $700 million worth of arms replacements. But politically, this is impossible. South Vietnam's army is doomed. Military analyst Brian Jenkins.
It was my belief that if that assistance were withdrawn, that then this military machine that we had created in South Vietnam would indeed collapse of its own weight. You've seen in the museums these suits of armor that look very, very formidable. Of course, there's nothing inside of them, and if you give it a good kick, the entire thing tumbles to the ground. And in effect, that's what we were creating in Vietnam.
Behind the scenes, there is pressure on Thieu to resign in favor of neutralists. With most of his country gone, he tries to reassure his people.
So I have been very calm at that period. We have been overrun, but not all. 1/3 of the army has been overrun, but not all. 1/3 of the country, or half of the country has been overrun, but not all. We still have many more crucial areas, and we still have strengths.
The only special American aid program is called Operation Baby Lift, the evacuation of 2,000 orphans to the United States. It begins tragically. A C-5A, the world's biggest transport plane, crashes outside Saigon, and 140 children die. The disasters in the field can no longer be hidden. Saigon begins to strengthen its highway perimeters. The communist advance is almost 2 years ahead of Hanoi's expectations. North Vietnam expert Wilfred Burchett.
Well, right at the beginning, it was felt that for the first season, offensive season attack, it would be good enough if they got to Da Nang, dug in there, consolidated and so forth, and then the next operational season went on down to Saigon and the Mekong Delta. But it was the panic in Hue and the collapse in Da Nang, and the ease with which all these provincial capitals just fell one after another, and the fact that the Saigon command was unable to consolidate its troops. They were not able to withdraw properly and regroup, and everything was done in a very slipshod and haphazard a faction with very, very little morale. The only real battle was, in fact, at Xuan Loc.
Xuan Loc is a small provincial capital only 38 miles northeast of Saigon. It blocks the main communist advance. Xuan Loc is the last hope for those who believe an all-out stand can prevent military collapse. April 9th, the North Vietnamese open fire on Xuan Loc. But this time, there is no easy victory. The communists later called the fighting fierce and cruel. 40,000 North Vietnamese troops launch an assault against the city. They are repelled. The defenders counterattack. In anxious Saigon, the name Xuan Loc becomes synonymous with hope and heroism. The North Vietnamese decide to bypass Xuan Loc and strike at the next city, Bien Hoa, closer to Saigon. After a week, both Bien Hoa and Xuan Loc are outflanked. The defenders retreat. It is April 16th. For the North Vietnamese generals, the way to Saigon is open. They order its capture within 2 weeks, by May 1st. Hanoi strategist Colonel Ha Van Lao.
The army units that had the mission of encircling and attacking Saigon only took with them what was necessary for the fight. Some advanced in convoys, others advanced on foot and ran and made 50 kilometers a day. They didn't even eat, because it was the goal, the taking of Saigon, that was their first preoccupation.
Saigon itself appears calm, but tension mounts as supplies of gasoline and other commodities grow short. Refugees keep crowding in. Now the elite see no way out.
Sincerely, I do not know what's going to happen next. So I know that I'm expecting something, but I don't know what.
President Thieu is now under intense pressure to resign. His suggested replacement is neutralist General Duan Van Minh, known as Big Men. It's believed the communists might negotiate a coalition government with him. Senior CIA analyst Frank Snepp.
Big Men was a self-proclaimed neutralist. He'd called himself a member of the Third Force. He had a brother or a cousin, there was some debate over this, who was a high-ranking North Vietnamese political officer, a general. So Big Men was the last American hope. Thieu had to be got out of the way.
On April 20th, U.S. Ambassador Graham Martin visits Thieu.
I simply went to President Thieu and laid out on the table as clearly as I could marshal the facts as they seemed to me to be relevant to the situation. The military situation, what the other side had, what we had, the political situation, the attitude in his own administration among his own generals, and expressed the conviction that while I did not believe myself that there was any possibility of such a transition, it was clear that some of his own generals wished to attempt it, but would not do so with him in position.
The next day, April 21st, Thieu resigns the presidency. As a caretaker government takes over, Thieu is hurried into exile.
And it so happened that it was my job to get Thieu to the airport shortly after his resignation. And what a night it was. It was a starlit night. There were tracers out along the perimeters of Tan Son Nhut Air Base. Several colleagues and myself from the CIA, as well as the CIA station chief, collected limousines. I was armed to the teeth because I had visions of what had happened to Ziem in 1963, ordered out of the car, cut down by young Turks. It was rather amusing to think back on it because we certainly couldn't have defended ourselves with the AK-47 under my seat, the snub-nosed .38 strapped on my hip. It was a great adventure. And I looked in the rear view mirror at Thew's eyes, and they were glistening with tears at that point as we passed through the air base on the way to the airplane that was to whisk him out of the country. Thew leaned over the seat, and he said, "Thank you for all you've done." And it came to me, thank you for what? For the 50,000 American lives that have been given here in Vietnam. And I thought about saying that, but being the the loyal bureaucrat I was, I kept my mouth shut, shook his hands. The man was crying. I guess he didn't need that final humiliation. He ran up to the airplane. There were cameras banging on various lapels. The suitcases were whisked aboard. And there was Ambassador Martin, immaculately tailored. He was wearing his horn rim glasses, I believe, looking very much like a professor, nothing like an ambassador bidding farewell to the last vestige of the American experiment in Vietnam.
Politically, it is over. Thew boards his flight into exile, carrying a lasting bitterness toward America.
They have abandoned. They have sold out us. They have a stab on their back, on our back. It's true. It's clear. They have betrayed.
Although the North Vietnamese forces are initially outnumbered almost 2-1, by now the South Vietnamese army has disintegrated. Now, in late April, the communists sweep the provinces south and west of Saigon. Vast numbers of refugees descend on Saigon, oblivious to shells and bullets, believing it a last safe haven. Saigon has held out against the North for 20 years. Thew, in exile, remains optimistic.
I was still confident that the army and the new leader, above all President Huong, and the leader of the army will resist to the end.
There's a pause in the fighting. Now, over 3,000 people are leaving the capital daily. Embassies begin to empty. American personnel are preparing final evacuation plans. The rich and influential South Vietnamese have already gone. Saigon is alone. The communists discuss how to take Saigon fast, with certain victory, and with minimum civilian casualties. As General Zung puts it, the old regime must be crushed and left like a snake without a head. There are now 7 days left to the end of the 10,000 days of war. April 23rd, 1975. Communist forces less than 30 miles from Saigon begin an advance on all sides. Hanoi had calculated on a final offensive lasting perhaps 2 years, but only 7 weeks have passed since the offensive began. The battle plan sends 100,000 troops hurtling at Saigon from 5 directions. Their orders are to penetrate and occupy Saigon within a week. The sounds of battle can be heard in the city. Hundreds of thousands seek escape. Many fear they will be executed by the victorious communists. Their only hope is the American embassy and an airlift to the United States. On the same day as the North Vietnamese advance, President Gerald Ford, in a speech in New Orleans, declares, "The war is over."
Today, America can regain the sense of pride that existed before Vietnam. But it cannot be achieved by refighting a war that is finished as far as America is concerned.
Hanoi's divisions race into position. Now there is no fear of American bombers which turned back previous offensives. The communists sweep through the rubber plantations east of Saigon. The South Vietnamese, greatly outnumbered, only briefly resist. Soviet-built amphibious tanks easily bridge the rivers, then roll along the U.S.-built highways leading to the capital. Infantry convoys mop up resistance in villages and outposts. Long-range artillery disables Saigon's main airport. The siege is fully in place. Saigon is encircled. Within the city, 30,000 South Vietnamese troops await orders, but many senior officers have deserted. Saigon has a new government. It appeals for peace talks and a ceasefire. This goes unanswered. Now, 72 hours remain until the end. Saigon's armor attempts to seal off the main highways. Tens of thousands of refugees try to board the last helicopters leaving the city outskirts. But soldiers fleeing the battlefield commandeer the choppers and retreat into the capital. The refugee flood is greatest on the main artery from the east, a four-lane highway once the pride of American engineers. Civilians and retreating soldiers sweep aside checkpoints in their haste to escape the onrush of battle. For the communist forces, the main problem is the speed of their advance. The troops are moving so quickly, it is difficult to supply them. Southern guerrillas act as guides, providing maps and pointing out weaknesses in government defenses. By now, 20,000 communist troops are within 12 miles of the city. 30,000 more are moving in. In his dispatches, the Communist field commander, General Zeng, likens his forces to a divine hammer held aloft. Saigon's army, he wrote, trembled in fright, watching the hammer descend. But at a key bridge called Dong Nai, on the main eastern approach, the South Vietnamese put up a fierce resistance. The bridge changes hands several times before the communists secure it. A major route into Saigon is now open to the attacking force. With 3 nights remaining, the communists intensify the fighting. Infantry and artillery assault the city perimeter, but here they halt. In captured areas, communist cameramen record the population tearing down symbols of their former government and celebrating in the streets. In Saigon, too, the streets fill. Here, the emotion is fear. The large Catholic population is especially nervous. Thousands gather to hear former Prime Minister Nguyen Cao Ky. He denounces his countrymen who have fled. Armed resistance can bring negotiations, Ky says.
The best way is to hold the line in the military. Because if the collapse continue, disintegration continue, and then there's no need for negotiation.
But the communists send a grim warning. 5 rockets drop into a crowded Saigon slum, leaving 5,000 homeless. Now, fears of a bloodbath increase. The next day, April 28th, the ring around Saigon tightens. Saigon troops rush to the Newport Bridge on the city outskirts. North Vietnamese commandos hold the far side of the bridge. The bridge attack increases fears of a military showdown in the city itself. The communists broadcast demands for total surrender within 24 hours. The deadline abruptly ends hopes for a political settlement, and it activates evacuation plans for 3,000 Americans. With the Newport Bridge attacked, Saigon's discipline breaks. As the Army of South Vietnam makes a final stand, civilians loot the nearby American commissary. Deserting soldiers join in. Looting spreads throughout the city. It is the last of the old life, the last hours and the death of a nation. The communists now attempt to close the last main exit. 5 captured planes with North Vietnamese pilots bomb Saigon's Tan Son Nhut airport. A few hours later, long-range shells and rockets wrecked the airstrip, leaving no choice for Ambassador Graham Martin.
And I picked up the phone and told Secretary Kissinger to inform the president that I had decided that we would have to go to option 4 to the helicopter airlift for the remaining Americans and for such Vietnamese as we could get out.
Waiting off the southern coast is an evacuation task force of 3 American aircraft carriers with support ships and combat marines. Noon, April 29th. The final exodus is about to begin. The ballad, "I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas," is the code signal for the final American departure. As it plays over the American service radio, officials, businessmen, and journalists gather at the embassy. Some Americans have spent a decade in Vietnam. They have only hours to leave. Thousands of Vietnamese try to join the evacuation. They threaten to overwhelm embassy guards. For years, the symbol of a wide-ranging war, the helicopters can now only land on the embassy roof or in its secluded compound. Hundreds of Americans and Vietnamese officials wait in priority groups. The Marines briefly return to Vietnam to keep order. Some embassy staff spend their last moments shredding documents. Each chopper takes an hour to reach the evacuation fleet. Only a relative few can make it. One is former Prime Minister Key.
I landed on the Midway aircraft carrier, and the admiral captain of the ship received me. And he left his office with his staff and just left me alone. So I stood there for 15 or 25 minutes just crying by myself. I couldn't stop it. Even I said to myself, oh no, I'm a soldier. Never cry. But it happened.
By now, hundreds of Vietnamese civilians are attempting to crash the embassy gates. Only the most persistent break through and get a chance to escape. In previous weeks, 100,000 South Vietnamese have bought their way out. But the sudden American evacuation still leaves behind many long-serving Vietnamese. Senior CIA analyst Frank Snepp.
I was sitting by the radios at the top floor of the embassy, monitoring the flow of intelligence as it continued to come in from various places. I listened to the radios, and I would hear people calling in over our radios, agents and employees who had been abandoned at various evacuation points. I'm Mr. Lon. I have served you for years. Save me. I am Mr. Ha. Save me. And there was no way to save them then. That, I believe, was the most tragic thing for me on that final day. The voices over the radios, and I still sleep. I have nightmares, and those voices still play in them.
An alternate evacuation plan is departure from Saigon by barge. Though encircling the city, the communists make it known they want an uncomplicated end. They briefly delay their final assault to allow all Americans to leave. One of the last to do so, Frank Snepp.
I'd gone out with the last CIA contingent. I got on the helicopter, stumbled up the roof up to the rooftop evacuation pad, got into the helicopter, and pulled in several of the Vietnamese agents we'd managed to get inside the embassy walls. And the helicopter began lifting up off the top of the roof of the embassy, and the tail gunner was crouched over his weapon. The back of the helicopter was open, and suddenly green lights, radar lights, began blinking inside the cabin. And the helicopter arched up over the city. And for a moment I could see framed in one of the windows Mimi's Bar, one of the most famous bars in Saigon where many an American GI had lost his shirt as well as his innocence. And I remember as we touched down on that deck, people all around me were crying. One Vietnamese woman we brought out was holding her child in her arms. We managed to get her and her child over the wall of the embassy, but we'd failed to get her husband. Her life would be forever altered. And we had abandoned so many we should have rescued and gotten out on the final day.
On the last day, the helicopters ferry 7,000 Americans and Vietnamese to the evacuation fleet. Weapons are thrown overboard to prevent trouble. Dozens of helicopters flown by South Vietnamese pilots arrive uninvited. The $250,000 machines are ditched to make room for those still arriving. Ambassador Martin wants to extend the evacuation. Washington rejects the recommendation as too risky.
I then drove to my house to pick up my wife. I think the Marine Guard log showed that I was there for 11 minutes. She packed one bag and walked out. She had left everything that we had because, again, to provide this aura of stability, we had not packed anything because the minute that we had picked up one thing to send out, it would have been known all over Saigon. So she paid the sort of a higher penalty than I did in the sense of losing some of the treasured possessions of a lifetime.
Martin is among the very last to leave. At 4:30 a.m. Saigon time, the senior American official in Vietnam gets a final order.
this young helicopter pilot came into my office with this scroll on the back of a pad that I never forget it. I mean, the name of the helicopter was the Lazy Ace, I think. And the President of the United States directs that Ambassador Martin come out on this helicopter. Well, what do you do then? I mean, do you try to emulate Admiral Nelson and put your blind eye out of the telescope, you know? I mean, you didn't hear or you didn't get it. And then for 45 years, I had been a disciplined officer of the United States government, and that I would not sort of spoil it in the end by any act of disobedience. And so I got on the chopper and came out.
At 7:53 a.m., April 30th, the last American troops leave. 15 years of U.S. military presence ends. The communists converge on the capital in a five-pronged assault. They overrun Saigon Airport, occupy the military and police headquarters, then move through the garbage-littered streets past a dazed population. The final hours are mercifully bloodless. A symbolic target is the presidential palace. A single tank provides the battle finale, storming through the iron gates. It is 11 a.m. A lone soldier runs forward to raise the communist flag. By noon, Hanoi's troops fill the city. Their flags are everywhere. At the palace, they arrest South Vietnam's last president, General Duong Van Minh. He is ordered to broadcast a message to his remaining troops. Lay down your weapons and surrender unconditionally. The communist field commander, General Zung, writes of these final victory hours. Our generation had known many victorious mornings, but there had been no morning so fresh and beautiful as this morning of total victory. For most of Saigon, the 10,000-day war ends with little immediate change. The black market reopens. Some soldiers from the north succumb to the temptations. Reforms soon follow. In Hanoi, the sudden victory after 30 years of war brings immediate celebration. Saigon is renamed Ho Chi Minh City, honoring the first president of North Vietnam. Prime Minister Pham Van Dong.
We fought year after year in extremely hard conditions, which went beyond all imagination. Here I would like to repeat President Ho Chi Minh's words, which we consider as a motto, a banner. Nothing is more precious than independence and freedom.
In Saigon, the Communist Victory Parade is held May 7th, the anniversary of the French defeat 21 years before. Ambassador Ha Van Lao.
There were a lot of emotions at that moment. Everyone could breathe again. The war was over. Peace reestablished. And above all, we became the true masters of our own country, our own land, independent. Our first thoughts were of our venerated president, Ho Chi Minh, who was not there to see with his own eyes the most glorious moment in our history.
Change comes slowly to Saigon. The communist victors initially treat the people with discretion. But the old regime is purged. 200,000 officials and military officers are sent to re-education camps. An estimated 1.5 million city dwellers are forcibly moved to the countryside. Within 2 years, the two halves of the country are officially unified as the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. The Vietnamese People's Liberation Army began as a ragtag assortment of volunteers. The Soviet-equipped North Vietnamese army, which parades through Saigon, is the 5th largest in the world. This impoverished agrarian nation built up a military force exceeded only by the great powers. This force has brought America its longest and costliest struggle. As it ends, the majority of Americans express only relief that it is finally over. More than 100 countries give diplomatic recognition to Vietnam. President Carter is initially sympathetic to establishing ties. A U.S. delegation visits Hanoi in 1977 to pave the way, but nothing comes of it. The U.S. considers Vietnam too much under Soviet influence. The twists of history and the impact of prolonged war leave Vietnam as a shattered land, but it is one land. The Vietnamese are now one nation. Vietnam is America's longest war. For the veterans, it is a silent homecoming. The country wants to forget Vietnam. The soldiers cannot.
Fire! Aim! Fire!
57,000 come home in flag-draped coffins. 150,000 return on stretchers. An estimated 500,000 have serious emotional problems. The majority, 2 million, return home unscarred by the war itself. But all are touched by the war's unpopularity. Their service and sacrifice goes largely unsaluted.
Society said, you didn't win your war, we won our wars. You know, you guys are losers. And they're not losers. And when I go around, I tell them there's somebody.
And because I'm a loser, according to their standards, they want nothing to do with me. I think when I was wounded in Vietnam, my blood ran just as heavily, and my pain was just as heavily as my father's and other fathers of Vietnam veterans.
They got a guilt too, the people that sent us there. They know what they back was wrong. They know what they did was wrong. But we're the ones that are carrying the mark for them. A statement I make to myself, the war is never going to be over for me. The war is never going to be over for any man that fought it. He's going to go to his grave with that war.
It is hardest for those closest to the combat. This is their history.
This society became hostile and in many ways alien to the Vietnam veteran. There was never really that homecoming.
Times Square, 1945. The celebration of victory in World War II. It is the reference point for the GIs who go to Vietnam. They have faith there is sufficient cause. After 2 world wars, then Korea, America's patriotism is unquestioned. Now, a new generation goes to war with the same sense of duty. Most go with a simple creed, a belief that when America calls, that call must be answered. The slogan was, "My country, right or wrong." Many came to describe it as a service to the American dream.
I bought an American dream. And because of possibly some of that upbringing, I still believe a little bit in that American dream. But I don't believe in it anymore in the way that it was taught to me. I question more now.
About 1 in 3 GIs sent to Vietnam see direct combat. 2 million rotate through as rear echelon troops. Another 6 million Vietnam-era veterans never saw these shores, serving at support bases throughout the world. Among the 500,000 who see combat, an unprecedented number are seriously wounded.
I got shot through the stomach. I stopped 8 bullets.
We got caught in an ambush. I was on a point with 2 of the machine gun crews, and I was the head machine gun crew, and I got a grenade in the back.
I was shot in the back, both legs, stabbed in the left arm through hand-to-hand combat. I was paralyzed in my right hand. I had shrapnel in my back, my feet, my head, and I had 40% of my body. My last wound was burned with napalm. And second, third degree burns. It was the most traumatic thing that ever happened to me in my life.
Those seriously wounded survive in Vietnam because of advanced medical and transport techniques. Helicopter mobility saves them. Medical rescue teams are able to evacuate casualties in the midst of combat. A wounded officer who becomes an expert on battlefield medicine, Captain Max Cleland.
There was a development in terms of medevac by chopper, coupled with high technology available on the battlefield that saved guys like me that would have died in World War II or Korea.
The technology includes portable field hospitals. In major engagements, inflatable clinics and emergency wards are brought to the battlefield. The care is often better than the veteran will receive back home. Intricate surgery of every kind is available close to the combat zones. One man who is saved this way, Captain Cleland.
The survival rate in Vietnam was highest of any modern war. In World War II, the survival rate for getting wounded there was 71%. It was about 74% in Korea, but it was 82% in Vietnam. We suffered 10,000 guys who lost a limb. 10,000 amputees out of Vietnam. You had more arms, legs, and eyes lost in Vietnam than in World War I and Korea combined for American forces. So in Vietnam, you stood a better chance of being seriously disabled and surviving it than any previous war. On the emotional level, you stood a better chance of having doubts about the rationale of that sacrifice.
Captain David Christian won a dozen medals.
I had the last rites twice. I remember the priest giving me the last rites. I woke up and I was in a semi-state of shock. And I started screaming, there can't be any justice. There's no God. Why me? I'm only 19 years old. Father, please. I come back with hundreds and hundreds of crippled men whose bodies were wrecked in Vietnam, and we aren't perceived with dignity. I spent 2 years as an inpatient in hospitals. And then I spent 6 years as an outpatient. Came home, and my refuge I was in the hospital. I felt comfortable in the hospital, filled with bodies that were wrecked from war. Guys missing eyes and legs and noses and their faces torn apart. I was comfortable among these people. They were my comrades.
The contrast in treatment back home angers them. A paraplegic Bobby Murdoch on the adjustment.
When I became a spinal cord injury, I started learning quick what you expect and what not to expect as far as care. Just got to learn to plan your life and start all over again. It takes a lot of patience, go through a lot of frustrations.
Among the 300,000 Americans wounded in Vietnam, 30,000 men come home totally disabled. It takes years of rehabilitation before they re-enter American life, often because the public cannot accept the reminders of an unpopular war. Another reason, some government hospitals are inadequate. Veteran Lou Corello recalls one.
They took me to the Bronx, and I swear to God, I thought I was going to prison. I mean, big, long hall. The ceilings were so high. It's just an old building, you know. And I got in there, and I stayed there about 6 months. But the drugs in there, I mean, easier to get in there than they are in the street. And the rats and the roaches were there. You know, I had a friend of mine who was a total quadriplegic. He must have had a rat on him that must have weighed about 3 or 4 pounds on top of his chest, and he couldn't get it off. And 2 of his pairs jumped into the chair and knocked this thing off with a cane and killed it, you know.
Across the country, the veterans protest hospital conditions.
I got hurt in 105 Hollister. I got too close to the muzzle, and I have headaches, and I've been having headaches ever since then. I go in this hospital, they turn me down.
When I was in the hospital, I saw the doctors coming around, and they were putting guys out of the hospital with disabilities, severe disabilities, and telling them to go to another administration, go to the VA.
The Veterans Administration is a $22 billion a year agency. For years, the VA regards Vietnam's casualties as no different to other wars. In 1976, the VA gets a new director, Max Cleland.
I think what happened was that the country was not prepared. Not only the Veterans Administration was not prepared, or that the government wasn't prepared to deal with casualties, but the country was not prepared to deal with high costs of the war, either financial or in personal terms.
Cleland himself is among the worst casualties. He lost both legs and his right arm in 1968 in a helicopter assault.
So I got out from under the chopper there. The chopper took off. I turned around and I saw a grenade there. Well, immediately I thought it was mine, and just before I touched it, it went off.
Cleland and others like him must overcome terrible physical wounds and still face another trauma, the reaction of loved ones. Family life becomes a casualty of the war.
My first thought was of my parents. I'm an only child. How would my parents react to their only child getting virtually blown away? My immediate question was, were they going to love me? Were they going to accept me or not? How am I going to explain this whole thing to my friends? I mean, my boyhood chums that I played basketball with and baseball with and swam and ran around the neighborhood. I mean, what am I going to say? You know, that you went to Vietnam and got all screwed up? I thought about it, and yet I didn't realize how deeply other people are affected by somebody seriously disabled. They're deeply affected. My father had a great guilt complex. My mother instinctively, the first few years, reacted in an overprotective manner. My friends were immediately affected. One guy, when he heard the news, went out and threw up. One lady actually avoided me for years because she couldn't face me. You're going to have this kind of emotional overload on friends and family. But I think it was even made worse by the reaction of the country toward Vietnam.
We handed out 29,000 boys from my county alone went and fought in Vietnam. That's a hell of a lot. My 2 brothers served over there. My one brother spent 4 years there. Today, the 3 of us are disabled from the service. The trauma of war is no different. So therefore, the respect and dignity should be the same. I was only 17 when I went in. I couldn't explain the magnitude of Vietnam at that time. And at 20 years of age, I knew how to fight a war, but I didn't know the reasons why or why not.
Some veterans cannot forget what the war did to Vietnam. At boot camp, they attack a mock Vietnamese village. Marine Jack McCloskey.
It was taught to us of saying you go into this ville and you have to blow everything away in this ville. And you begin to do that because your basic mistrust of the Vietnamese people is already ingrained in you. Anything with slant eyes, anything that was a gook was a gook. They were not human beings.
And we were always told, as long as you don't make human contact with them with the hands, you will always see them as the enemy. But once you touch him, you're going to find out he's got flesh and blood like you do.
Marine Lou Corello lost both legs in Vietnam. But like many others, he is also traumatized by the nature of the war, by what it did to his mind.
I was part of a team that killed civilians. Civilians who were in key spots. I was like a hired gun, you know. I still can't sleep without a light on. All the people maybe that I either put away or helped put away are going to get me.
One of the nightmares I still have about it is having my medic bag by me and reaching down, reaching for a battle dressing, and that battle dressing turns into a body bag. And I still can't get over that.
It becomes an individual struggle to put the war behind them. By 1968, the wounded are coming home in ever-increasing numbers, arousing new civil protest.
The country was going through a national nervous breakdown. The country went through more history than we could consume, and certainly more history than the average citizen could explain. The whole anti-war movement really grew and peaked in '68, and the message came through loud and clear to me, loud and clear to my family, and loud and clear to my friends and family, that somehow, maybe this veteran got wounded for nothing.
One Washington march draws 1,000 veterans. Many are from Middle America, now radicalized by their Vietnam experiences. Years pass before America understands them.
The rationale for your service and sacrifice begins to be pretty thin. And it's kind of an emotionally trying time to begin trying to put your life back together. And you're looking especially at the past to see how you got to where you are. And the past becomes less and less rational. The past becomes less and less acceptable to the American people. And you begin to be identified as the character in the story that went wrong.
Some are prone to violence, a police problem. This becomes the public stereotype of the Vietnam veteran. For some years, a disproportionately high number of prisoners in federal jails are Vietnam veterans. Most of their crimes are drug-related. They blame mental problems, which they call post-Vietnam syndrome. For these men, rap or therapy sessions with fellow veterans are their mainstay for many years. One young veteran serving 12 years for manslaughter tells of his homecoming. No one to talk to, no psychiatric help. He killed a man for drug money. In Vietnam, he saw his Marine unit wiped out. Then he killed a civilian.
I fired a burst of about 5 or 6 at her, and she hit the ground and rolled over, and I knew it was a girl then, and it just flashed through my mind all the complications I'd have going over there if she's still alive, so I just went ahead and killed her. We came across civilians, burn their house, take what you wanted out of it, mess with their women, stuff like that. It was just a nasty way to treat the people. When I got back from Vietnam, I had nobody talk to me or anything, it was just, well, okay, you made it back, great, man. Do what you want now. And what I should have done now, I see, is should have got a psychiatrist or somebody that I could tell these things to. But I don't really know what it made me. It made me sorry, I guess.
Another Marine, wounded medic Jack McCloskey, begins a self-help veterans group, visiting prisons and hospitals.
I'm 60%, my neck's been totally fused. I've had 7 cervical operations. My family's probably suffered more than I have, really, because I'm kind of a bear to live with.
I think your anger is righteous and valid. I think also from the anger I've learned a little patience. That I have to be patient. That I have to still hope. If I didn't hope, then I could never regain my innocence, and I want to regain my innocence.
We had the prettiest equipment. We had the most beautiful equipment. We had guns that were beautiful. Let me finish. We could put in, it was a 20, let me finish!
I think the problem being here is...
And much later on, using trained psychiatrists, the government starts a program called Operation Outreach.
And no, if I told anybody I was a Vietnam vet, they thought I was a killer. I was called a murderer. So I shut up. I withdrew for 7 years, and over those 7 years, that's the worst thing I could do. It built up inside of me. And so here I am in the group. It's something that my mind bleeds from hell when I go back to Vietnam. But it never leaves my head. There was a war there where our friends died and we killed people. We understand what that means, but the rest of America doesn't.
A lot of anger, a lot of frustration, a lot of alienation. To me, those things are signs of sanity. They're not insane. How else could you come out of that situation not feeling that? One of the most profound effects that Vietnam has had in this country is that we have lost touch with our sense of caring. We have always been known as a country that cares. And Vietnam's changed that a little bit.
60% of the veterans take up socially oriented jobs or return to school. They are aided by 2,000 self-help groups across America. Years later, the VA opens up storefront clinics. The VA's problem is to get veterans and society to accept each other. The difficulties are greater for black veterans. In the early years, blacks suffer a higher casualty rate, and back home, social tensions make rehabilitation harder. By 1980, the VA states that 1 3/4 million veterans still need emotional counseling, but new programs help.
When I was in a veterans hospital up there and went back to Colorado, and within about a week, someone on the Colorado Wheelers got a hold of me, and next thing I knew, I was out square dancing. It's just one of those things where we can go out and dance for a group of regular square dancers, and they see us do it, and they realize that we're all just out there doing the same thing, and that's mainly having a good time.
Don't look at the Vietnam veteran as a drug-addicted, forgotten loser who is no good to this society. The converse is really the case. The fact of the matter is that the average Vietnam veteran has undergone probably more physical and emotional stress than most anybody as a group in his generation. He has survived that. He is a survivor of the toughest kind of warfare, both psychological and physical. And he is able, because of that, to be a better human being and appreciate life more and contribute more to it. We now are sending some 66% of our Vietnam-era veterans back to school. By the early 80s, we will have sent more Vietnam veterans back to college than we did after World War II. We're turning out, in effect, the most educated group of young men that we've ever sent to war.
Lou Corello goes back to school to study sociology. He hopes to counsel other veterans. He looks to the future. The past, he says, is painfully personal.
I don't want people to know my whole story. I just want you to leave me the hell alone and let me go. But understand me when you see me.
In a government-sponsored opinion poll, a majority of Americans call Vietnam the wrong war in the wrong place. This verdict comes 15 years after Americans first go into combat.
For a Vietnam veteran, I think the key element is to be able to let this thing go and not let it haunt him all his life. And then to come to an attitude of saying, well, I can help my brother veteran. I want to help, and if I can use my experience to do so, I will.
No, we have problems within our own country. We have to iron them out. And the world should be the same way. Vietnamese are human beings. Many of their families are suffering today because they lost sons. They lost families in something they believed in. We lost. And I think on all sides, honor should be had.
Vietnamese military and civilian dead, north and south, are unknown, but they are estimated to be close to 2 million during the war with America. This is equivalent to the United States losing about 20 million dead. As to the North Vietnamese veteran, his problems and perspective are again unknown. He knew brief peace, then the war went on. The invasion of Cambodia, invasion by China. After the longest continuous war of modern times, many of its veterans feel it will take as long again to understand it and forget it.
I still love America. And I want to, it's almost like Johnny Appleseed. I want to replant the seeds. I think in some ways that Vietnam was a pesticide that we used and didn't know what damage it would cause to us until years later.
Bardstown, Kentucky, small town America. The people recall how Vietnam reached into their town.
I guess you might say that probably most of us didn't want to go. We realized that we had to, and we'd been taking the government's money as a reserve unit, and it was time for us to do our thing. We were asked to go, so we went based on that. I don't think anybody wants to go to war.
Well, I was shaken up, no question about that, but I felt that it was right, it was the thing to do, and I was in that unit, and I was willing to do my part.
No qualms. I thought we were, and I think I'm speaking for the majority of the people in our community that felt that we were doing the right thing.
Yeah, you got some heroes, I'm sure, that, looking for medals and this kind of stuff, but we weren't that kind of people.
This is the heartland of America, where history is made and judged. It is the second oldest town in Kentucky, population 5,800. 9 churches, 3 factories, 1 art gallery. Bardstown is Bourbon, and the inspiration of the song, My Old Kentucky Home.
I really don't think it was worth what we lost. I don't think it was worth the men that we lost over there, the number of men we lost. I don't think it was worth the money that was poured into the country. I don't think any way, shape, or form it was worth anything to the United States government for what went on and what was lost. And
I don't want to say that my buddies' lives are wasted. We were asked to do a job, and we attempted to do that job. Now, I don't agree with the way we went about it.
And he kept telling me, "Don't cry, Mama, I'll be back." But when I look back, the last look, I could see tears running down his eye. But he was a good soldier, and he believed in it.
He was scared. I think he was really scared that something might happen.
Bardstown men join a National Guard artillery battery. Its 500 men are called to active duty May 1968. 100 go to Vietnam. Several stay together, assigned to Fire Base Tomahawk north of Da Nang. They fire artillery support for the infantry. They write home about the boredom of battlefield life, but they're together and have been since childhood. Being from the same town seems like a good idea. They served 7 months on a hilltop. June 1969. A sudden night assault causes heavy casualties at Fire Base Tomahawk. Some Bardstown men miss the attack. Their relatives get confusing reports.
But they really wanted to know exactly what did happen because they'd heard so many things. And they wanted to talk with someone who had firsthand knowledge. And of course, several of the other men had better knowledge about it than I did because I wasn't there until we could fly in the next morning.
4 Bardstown sons die on one day. The community tries to understand.
One of the fellows, father asked me, where was he? Do you know exactly what happened? Do you know how he was killed? And this type of thing. And really, I couldn't answer those questions because I wasn't really at that part of that end of the hill at the time it had happened. So I couldn't really give him a straight answer.
I got one letter that's telling me that he was standing guard, watch over his men. He saw the Vietnams coming, and when he turned and ran to tell them to get in the foxhole, he was hit by a grenade.
In all, 15 Bardstown men die in Vietnam. Where? How? Why? Was there meaning? Relatives reach for those last moments so far away.
One will tell you one thing and another will tell you another one. You never really know whatever. Really, me, I never really found out what happened. I've been told some things, but knowing what really happened, I didn't.
The town was shook. There's no question about it. There was not only families that were involved, but just people in general.
You just almost couldn't believe it. You know, it's just something like that just don't happen, but it happens.
And those who directed the war, the policymakers, generals, and ambassadors, all come to ask, what went wrong in Vietnam?
Well, the first thing about Vietnam is that the campaign, the military, the U.S., the American effort in Vietnam was undertaken without adequate planning.
You couldn't say that we were saving the world from Ho Chi Minh. No one in their senses expected that if Ho Chi Minh won in Vietnam, that next week his legions would appear on Malibu Beach.
The American military establishment and our political leaders not only could not deliver that swift military victory, but could not even define what that victory was.
What do we want? Peace! When do we want it? Now! You want it? Talk up! What do we want? Peace! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Peace! When do we want it? Now!
We did not take steps to whip up war feeling among the American people. For example, we didn't parade military units through our cities. We didn't send pretty movie stars out to factories to sell bonds. All those things that were done during World War II. And one reason we did not was that we thought that in a nuclear world, it's too dangerous for an entire people to become too angry. Now, this creates a problem because we were trying to do in cold blood what we were asking our men on the battlefield to do in hot blood.
You know, they tried to make the war, the higher-ups did, so that they could play the war as long as they could with this little bit of friction from back home, from the mothers back home. Play the war as a nice war. I mean, they gave people R&Rs. They did everything in Vietnam with the Vietnam War, but try to win the damn thing.
Had the United States determined that the outcome of events in South Vietnam at that time were of vital interest to the United States, that then we should have been prepared to, and indeed, we should have dedicated the full range of our national power to bring about a successful outcome.
We had as fine a military force as America has ever assembled. A force that could have brought the war to an end if it hadn't been for political decisions that prohibited that.
I think the leadership of some future day will have to consider whether maximum force must not be used at the very beginning. One could make an argument now that, as far as Vietnam was concerned, that when President Kennedy decided to make a fight for Vietnam and not for Laos, that he should have put in 100,000 troops immediately, put in a stack of blue chips straight away in order to try to make it clear to the people in Hanoi that we were going to take this very seriously.
America sent 500,000 troops. The military wanted 200,000 more.
And of course, if we'd chosen to use it all and to use our full power, we could have absolutely demolished it. As General May said, we could have bombed them back to the Stone Age.
The notion that some more incremental aid, $750 million more, 200,000 more troops, would have turned it around, I think is preposterous.
Frankly, I think the loss of the war really stemmed from the fact that the Americans had misinterpreted the nature of the war for so many years, sent 550,000 American soldiers over there to fight the war, which really was not the right reaction to what was the nature of the war. Then we became impatient when the soldiers weren't able to find the enemy and eliminate the threat.
Damn snapper out there. Drop back about 5 meters. 5 meters.
You read about wars, you hear about wars, and some people are killed and wounded in wars, but you never think it's going to be you.
We ended up shooting at monkeys one night. We were so scared.
Scared.
I didn't think in terms of that much of really if I was going to be able to come back home, or if I came back home, I'd be in one piece.
But because of the flames, I was panicked. And I was screaming, and I was trying to climb and scale this cliff, and I kept slipping back into the flames, and they were all over me.
It's monotonous. It's monotony punctuated by moments of sheer terror. It was a hit and miss. It was like hunting a hummingbird. You'd go to one village, nothing there, another village, nothing there, nothing there, and the enemy, the hunting hummingbird we were after, was just buzzing around. No knowledge of what the enemy was after. No knowledge what I was after as a soldier, what my purpose was. You secure a village, you search it, and you leave, and the village reverts to the enemy. It seemed a senseless strategy, and yet I thought perhaps there's some rhyme or reason behind it. I never found out. To this day, I haven't found out.
The Vietnam War begins to lose popular support in the United States in 1968, the same year Bardstown sends its men.
I said that the opposition to the war would begin to develop when they were sending bodies back, not to Louisville, Kentucky, and Memphis and New York, where nobody in the next block knows that somebody's dead, or in the next house. But when they begin to come back into towns of 5 or 10,000 or smaller communities, that these are historic events in a town of that size, that so-and-so's son has been brought back dead and been buried here, that this would make the county papers and the smaller papers, and eventually something would happen in the country.
It was about a week after his death that his body arrived. It arrived on Sunday night. They went and picked him up on Sunday night. And they found out that he was an open casket. They even stopped by home to tell me that he was back and that I could see him that night.
Nearly all local people, we went to school together and played ball together, and, the whole works, sure, we knew them all.
I felt like I had been cheated, and I felt like she had been cheated out of her father, and I was scared. I didn't know whether I could make it or not, or whether I could raise a child by myself.
I saw some people beg to live. I saw some people die, and I just questioned myself, really, was this worth all of that?
My biggest relief is I feel that was his time, it was God's will. I feel that that was his time to go, that God has set for him to go.
It definitely made me, I think, a better person, no question. It made me really realize what life was about.
That they were done wrong, all the boys.
So first, we didn't know our ally. Secondly, we knew even less about the enemy. I don't know of anybody, never met anybody who had ever met any of the senior leaders in Hanoi. We knew one or two of them by name, but only by name.
Dien Bien Phu to Xuan Loc, Son Tay to Son Mi, the Red River Delta to Kon Tum. The Vietnamese roll call covers 30 years, and the casualties touch virtually every community. Tet, the Vietnamese New Year, is their Remembrance Day. This is the Vietnamese equivalent of Bardstown. Here, too, the towns and villages have reminders. An estimated 2 million Vietnamese, south and north, soldiers and civilians, died.
Relative to our own population, the North Vietnamese took what for us would have been 10 million killed and continued to sustain the effort. At the same time, I think I overestimated the patience of the American people. And I think the real decision to bring this to an end was not made on college campuses or in the streets, but when people at the grassroots, maybe the first half of 1968, came to the conclusion that if we could not tell them when this struggle was going to be over, we might as well chuck it.
So it is really the fact that we went wrong in not having a solid basis of knowledge of the essentials of the enemy, our friends, and ourselves.
I feel the single greatest cause of America's defeat in Vietnam is that we were backing a weak, traditionalist, half-formed Southern regime against a highly motivated and ideologically disciplined regime in the North. That it was really the weaknesses of the South Vietnamese, their inability to pull themselves together, their incompetence, their corruption, their factionalism. The horse we were backing was not a horse which, without a great deal more flogging, was capable of winning that race. I think that was the single biggest reason why, despite the enormous effort that America put into Vietnam, the outcome was so disastrous.
Vietnam is the longest, the most unpopular, the most needless, useless, and most mysterious war in American history.
We did it out of the finest, highest motives. We did it not for any selfish gain. We did it for no territorial expansion. We thought we could help save freedom in the world if we got over there. So our theory was right, but what we thought was this spread of Soviet aggression, in my opinion now, seems very clearly to have been a civil war in Vietnam.
It was obviously a sad experience for the American people. Whether we should have been there or not is a question I don't know. I mean, we, maybe in hindsight, one would say we shouldn't have been there.
To me, the strong feeling that I have now is that the United States should be helpful to its allies all over the world. That's one of our major functions. But we should not get involved, certainly from a standpoint of a military involvement, unless we are very certain that in that particular area, the national security of the United States is at stake.
There's those great differences. Americans just can't get away from the idea that we're big and therefore God must have put his hand on our shoulder and we wouldn't be so rich if we weren't wise, and therefore we must be wise.
I think a lot of Vietnam vets are probably more in tune with what we would call patriotism than our government is. I don't think that I'm the loser. I think my government was the loser in that.
Well, I'm not sure America did lose in Vietnam. I think that the question of the Vietnamese losing in Vietnam was primarily due to the lack of will and desire of the people of South Vietnam to defend their own country.
If we'd had any understanding of Vietnam, we'd never got into that. It was a perfectly asinine and insane undertaking.
I consider my society a loser.
I believe that the real losers were the people of Southeast Asia, the people of Cambodia, the people of Laos.
So I think it was a great tragedy and a sad chapter in American history.
I was there for over a year, and I never developed a love for those people. And maybe I should have, and this is something I need to search for. But I love this country, and my country asked me to go. And that's the reason I went, and willingly. And I may have to do it again. someplace else, who knows?
57,000 American troops died in Vietnam.
Oh, I think they'll always be remembered. I don't think there's any question about that.
We'll never forget it here. You know, we put the monuments on the courthouse square, and especially the ones of us who were involved in it, and definitely all the families. It won't be forgotten here. It can't be, you know. It's simple.
It's nice, you know, for them to remember them, to put something like that up. But, you know, something like that's not going to bring them back, but it's, you know, it's nice of the town to want to remember them.
Well, I remember practically everything as if it was just yesterday. From the time he was a little boy, baby on up. I'll never forget it.
Bardstown, a decade later. And central Hanoi, where remembrance chimes sound at noon every day.